Are the New Orleans Pelicans cursed? That's one question a lot of fans, including myself, have been asking this season as they have dealt with multitude of injuries to some of their star players, with a recent one really hindering the development of some of their young stars, alongside a star player who just came back from injury receiving a suspension. We're going to be diving in and going into all of this and more on this episode of Swish City. Without further ado, let's dive in on all of the news. Like I said in the introduction, we're going to be discussing and talking about this New Orleans Pelicans team as they are deemed cursed basically this season. If we want to look at their stats, we can see that they are 7-31 on the year and not where a lot of fans expected them to be this season, including myself. If you want to dive back, look at some of my some of my previous videos on this channel, you guys can see my predictions for this team. And I thought that the Pelicans were going to be a top 6 seed in the West. And unfortunately, for my predictions and for the fan base and for this team, injuries have definitely limited this team's potential this season, as we've seen their new recent injury of Pelicans saying Herb Jones has a torn labrum in his right shoulder and is out indefinitely. And added on to that, the New Orleans Pelicans have suspended Zion Williamson for one game of a violation of team policies. And this is absolutely crazy, as we just saw Zion Williamson come back after he's been out for 2 months and drop 22 points, 6 rebounds, and 4 assists. So to see him receive this suspension from this game tonight, taking on the Philadelphia 76ers. He must have done something that really messed with this organization. But this is not great for the Pelicans to see, one, Zion Williamson miss this game, but two, seeing one of their star young players in Herb Jones go down with a torn labrum and out with a right shoulder, as he's been one of their blessings for this team this season. Like I've mentioned, with this Pelicans team, they have dealt with a multitude of injuries this season. And if you want to look at their injury report just right now, obviously Herb Jones has been added to that, but Trey Murphy has been sidelined for this team for a little while. Brandon Ingram has been out indefinitely with that ankle sprain with this Pelicans team, and DeJounte Murray is set to return, but he was out for a little while as he got initially hurt on opening night, then was brought back, and then re-hurt himself as well. And if we want to look at the games played for this team, as you guys can see, Zion Williamson 7, Brandon Ingram 16, CJ McCollum 25, Trey Murphy 23, DeJounte Murray 21, Herb Jones 20. Those are your 6 best players that you have on this roster, and none of them have even 30 games, the highest being CJ McCollum at 25. And as we know with this Pelicans team, they've played in 38 contests. So having guys on that have played in more of their games being guys like Javonte Green, Jeremiah Robinson Earl, and Yves Missy and Brandon Boston, with all 4 of those players having at least 30 games played, is not been great for this Pelicans team, as that's obviously hindered their production, hindered their chances of being a dominant team. And with the Pelicans having some questions kind of going into this season as well, revolving around Brandon Ingram and his trade rumors and his extension and all this stuff, it just has not been great for Pelicans fans this year. As like I said, they're 7-31, have no chance of basically climbing back into even the play-in race here at this point, and are kind of just like a wash season, similar to the Memphis Grizzlies last year when they ran into their injuries. The Pelicans obviously have had more this season and are obviously hindered by that, so they're going to have to be probably sellers at the trade deadline. What's even crazier is a player in Herb Jones was viewed to be maybe not on the market. Some teams were definitely interested in a player in Herb Jones as he's been a quality offender. He was one that the Pelicans just extended, and that was one that I thought that the Pelicans shouldn't let go of. But if the Pelicans really wanted to tank, really wanted to get all of their best value off some of their assets, some of these teams might have sent them some good packages for a player like Herb Jones. But with him sustaining this injury, that completely eliminates that even possibility, even if it was on the Pelicans' radar, which I wouldn't have done if I were them. This severely limits this team, as they obviously been sellers, but want to have some of these young players be able to stand out, perform, kind of find their roles. Guys like Trey Murphy, guys like Herbert Jones, so that they can really find themselves in this rotation, so it can be easier for them to move off a player in Brandon Ingram. But with Ingram getting with this injury and having all this stuff happen as well, it's just been a wild mess. Because like I mentioned, Zion Williamson has been hurt with this team. He's only played in 7 games. Brandon Ingram has played in less than 20 games for this team, and that is very, very difficult. So when talking about Brandon Ingram and kind of trying to figure out what the Pelicans should do ahead of this trade deadline with selling, I think a player in Zion Williamson is going to remain on this team. He's looked very dominant when he's played, and it's going to be a little bit difficult for the Pelicans to move a player who has had injury history this season, and when he is healthy, does look very dominant. I know a lot of teams would take a flyer on Zion if he became available, but I don't see Zion trade talks or Zion possibilities of him being moved off of New Orleans being stated until the off season. But a player in Brandon Ingram who's, seeking an extension as a young player who a lot of teams could definitely buy on the market, I could see being available via trade. And there's a lot of stars and a lot of teams that are on the market looking to make moves. And I think one that they should definitely inquire with moving Brandon Ingram was getting involved in a deal for Jimmy Butler saga, and that's with obviously the Phoenix Suns. But having a deal, if you want to listen to this proposition of Jimmy Butler going to the Suns, obviously the Miami Heat getting Brandon Ingram, a little bit of a replacement in Jimmy Butler. They still want win now talent. They still want a quality player, and they could extend Brandon Ingram on an extension a little bit cheaper than a guy in Jimmy Butler to still have room to build pieces around them with Tyler Hero and with Bam Adebayo. The Heat would get what they want. The Pelicans would move off of a player, and Brandon Ingram would probably get some draft capital, would get some expiring contracts, and that's where it gets tough. You send Bradley Beal, obviously he's not going to Miami, to Detroit, and then Detroit sends what they want to New Orleans. A deal maybe involving Isaiah Stewart, one of their big men, expendable contract, and Tim Hardaway Jr., who's on an expiring deal with some salary, could be able to get that done for the Pelicans, as they've had some difficulties trying to move Ingram even in the offseason, and just getting something for Ingram could be the best of both worlds for both teams. Pelicans could also look at some of these other guys as well on the roster that are expendable. Like I mentioned, CJ McCollum has been brought up in trades for this team, and even players on the low end of the team, guys like Javonte Green, Daniel Tice, those are players that could be helpful for some contenders across this NBA. And I do think that some teams will inquire about two of those rotational players, even if it is just for a second round pick, as they are on, veteran minimum contracts or close to veteran minimum contracts, just to get some extra draft capital could be key, and also give some development to some of those other young players that have really emerged through this development and rebuild this season with them kind of tanking due to injuries. But let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section. Do you guys think the Pelicans are cursed this season? Ultimately, I think they've gotten in a little bit of bad luck, and over the last couple seasons have gotten into this string of bad luck, which may think some fans think they are cursed, but I ultimately do not think so. I just think it is just, like I said, something might be in the water in New Orleans. It is just a tough season for them, but I do think they'll be able to bounce back and rebuild off of this. This might be a blessing in disguise for them. Maybe not wanting to extend, maybe not being a top tier team would have given them extending Brandon Ingram, buying into this team, and then ultimately screwing some things up in the future if injuries did occur. So maybe this is, like I said, a blessing in disguise with getting some injuries, looking to sell, looking to rebuild on the fly, and still getting a top tier pick, obviously, in the draft this season to pair alongside some of those young guys, and Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, Brandon Boston, Jordan Hawkins, and etc. But let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section, what you guys ultimately think about this Pelicans team and how you guys feel about the injury to Herb Jones, because if you guys are like myself, I think this is absolutely disappointing to see one of the players who was one of the more impactful wing defenders last season and this season suffer another big term injury. But like I said, you guys have been absolutely fantastic. Drop down your thoughts, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Have a great rest of your day, and peace out.